What's up, party people? Chris from Crashbox here. Today we're going to look at making trees. Tools we're going to be using. Up first is this Marvy foam cutter. I believe that came from Hobby Lobby. And I immediately got black paint all over it. But it works very well for what we're going to be using for today. We're going to be using 3 different grits of sandpaper, 100 grit, 220, and 1500. We're going to be using an awl. That's an AWL. It's a pointy little tool like that. And, of course, trusty X-Acto number 11. I'm sure we'll get some use out of that today. A couple tools from Hot Wire Foam Factory. Their 3-inch knife will be used a good bit today. And as well as their other tool here, the bow with the adjustable shapes is quite handy to use as well. Hot glue gun, of course, to hold everything together. You can use wood glue or any kind of craft glue really, but hot glue for a process is just quicker for me. And we are going to be using a heat gun. This is from Harbor Freight, or you can use a hairdryer. As far as colors, we're going to be using black, nutmeg, pewter gray, and white from Apple Barrel. Those are the plaid paints they sell at Walmart. Same thing at Michael's and pretty much every craft store. Ground cinnamon, of course, one of my favorite things to use in my builds. We'll be using some ground cinnamon. And this is a product I haven't used much, but we're going to try it today. It's Slimy Grime Dark Vallejo, one of their environment colors. So that's a look at the majority of what we're going to be using today. Here's some materials. So we're going to be using 4 different thicknesses of foam. So we're starting out, the main body will be a 2-inch foam. And the limbs we will make primarily out of 1-inch foam. And 1/2-inch foam possibly. Just grab some scraps, some drops really from cutting out things on the X-Carve. We are setting up a fence here, a straight edge basically, to square off the 2-inch foam into 2x2s. If you don't have 2-inch foam, you can glue together 2 pieces of 1-inch, and it'll do the same. You'll just have a seam. So I bought a sheet of this a while back and have been going through it, making trees and other things. So here's the process. You have your fence, you got your wire tight, make sure it's good and hot, and you're just going to run right along that line. Literally just push it through. So this particular tool is not necessarily made for this heavy, thicker XPS foam. I think it's more for like styrofoam or floral foam, if you're familiar with that. But it does work. It just takes a little bit longer, which it's fine. I mean, it's hard to cut foam that thick with a knife or even a saw. You get some wonky edges sometimes, but this will be a nice, clean, square piece that we'll have here. There we go. Yep, there we go. So it's nice and square. It doesn't have to be perfect. The thing you're going to learn about making these trees, it's a very Bob Ross thing where you can go and make it into whatever you want. There's no rhyme or reason really. So we're going to use this same tool to take the corners off by just taking a little bit at a time. And once again, there's no right or wrong way to make this look. Trees look like whatever trees decide to look like. So by doing this process and taking chunks of it off, you really start to get some less square shape out of it. I think that's really the key, is to get a less square shape, because you obviously are going for round. So this is just knocking some of those edges off. So up next, we're going to use the bow from Hot Wire Foam Factory, and it's you can change the tautness on it, so you can use it several different ways. Like here, I'm holding it with a wide width and pulling down and taking chunks of the foam out, and it just falls right off. And a lot of this will get sanded out in the next step. So we have 3 grits here. We have 100 grit, we have 220, and we have 1500. So those are the 3 grits that we will be using to start sanding on this. Obviously, you start sanding on the roughest, which is the lowest number. So we're going to start with 100. And unfortunately, this is a very cheap sandpaper, and it is not very quality. So as you see the process speed up here, you'll see the paper deteriorate. But once again, this is an art project for sure. So you get the shape you want out of it. And the sandpaper digs in a little bit, which is fine, because if you look at a tree, it's not consistent. There's nothing really the same about any part of a tree. And I just did that. Yeah. So after we use the 2 heavier grits, we're going to go over it with the 1500. And that really just kind of softens everything up. And from there, we're pretty square. Not square. We're pretty round, actually. And we're going to take a quick second here to clean up. This is a messy process, and I suggest if you have some sort of ventilation for all this foam dust, run that. So we're going to use the bow end of the Hot Wire Foam Factory tool to open our notch at the top. This is obviously a dead tree. So this is, or not a dead tree. Maybe it's just a winter tree, but I think it would be dead. Maybe lightning struck it. Who knows? So we're going to go in with a 220 into that crevice we just made. I've done it different before. I've actually used a 1-inch what do you call it? A hole bit, really, I guess, and opened it up. But for this one, didn't want to go that far. Okay, so here's some scale. Here is a Kamen Rider figure doing something. I don't know how to pose Kamen Rider figures. I'll leave that up to the professionals out there. But there's Daredevil hanging out, looking the wrong direction. All right, so now we're going to use that 3-inch knife, and you're just dragging it down and making the bark lines. There's nothing fancy about it. There's no correct way to do it. My only suggestion is just don't go too deep. If you don't have these hot wire tools, this can all be done with a knife. It can all be done with razor blade and patience. If you have the tools, use them. They're not horribly expensive to get. So this process goes all the way around the tree, and you can make them as squiggly as you want. You can fill them in. I put a hole in there, because trees have holes in them sometimes. So now I'm going back in and just kind of touching it up and adding a couple extra lines here and there. A lot of it's just deciding how exactly you want to do this, and how much work you want to put into it. I probably should learn to do this on camera instead of off camera. Forgive me as I learn how to do these videos. I'm just kind of roughing up the edges there, like, a lightning strike or it broke off or something. It wouldn't necessarily be a super clean break. All right. So our 220, we're going to use it on what we just did around the edge there. Kind of clean that up so it's not so aggressive in its pattern. Okay, now we're going to use a wire brush. I believe I got this I think I got it at Harbor Freight. I'm not 100% sure. But basically what you're going to do is just go with the grain. You're going to use it up and down to create a wood grain in the foam. Once again, no rhyme or reason. This is art. This is whatever you want it to be. Now I'm going to take the heat gun on a low setting, and I'm going to use it on the tree. And the reason I'm doing this is it's going to open up some of those cracks, and it's also going to seal any kind of loose parts you may have from the carving or anything. I do this on not every project, but sometimes if there's a cut I need to square up, I'll use a heat gun. All right, so now we got that all done, and now we're going to make some limbs. So basically we're following the exact same process. We're going to use the exact same tools to make the limbs. So I've already cut the piece out here, and we're going to use several different kinds of sandpaper. Once again, the 100, the 220, and the 1500. All the sandpaper I believe I got at Walmart, readily available. I'd suggest buying better sandpaper than that 100 though, because it doesn't last very long. Look at that technique there. Look at that wrist game. So you're gonna wipe this down. Not wipe it down. You're gonna rub this down with the sandpaper. Same process. get all the grooves and whatnot out of it. Once you've gotten the shape that you're looking for, once you get the roundness that you want. Okay, so we got our tree limbs made using the same process. I'm going to use the bamboo skewer sticks to attach the trees before we glue them on. Basically, I just break a piece of the skewer off. I stick it in there, however I want to line it up with the tree. All right, so I mark a hole like that just so I know where to line it up. Now I'm going to flip that around and put the point end out. And this will get glued in a minute. This is just kind of test fitting everything. And there you go. It just snugs right in there. And we're going to put a limb on the other side. Once again, you can put these wherever you want. It doesn't matter. You can make them more straight up, more out, however you'd like. There you go. So now we're going to make a base for it. And we're going to use this thin foam. It's a fan fold foam is what I like to call it. And we're going to just kind of make a generic shape around the middle. But first we're going to mark where our tree kind of lives. That way we can balance out exactly where we're going to cut it. So I'm just grabbing a pin and marking the corners or the four sides, however you want to say. All right, now this is using that same little foam cutter. It does really well on this thin foam just because there's not much to get through. And just a random pattern here for the edge of this base. I mean, you could do them round if you wanted or however you want. I just think an oddball shape looks pretty cool. So that's where it's going to kind of sit. Yep. So we are now going to rough it up a little bit with some aluminum foil balls, and then we're going to glue in the bamboo skewer sticks. I just glue it in and then put the limbs in the holes here with glue on them. Hold it for a minute so that sets up. Hot glue is hot if you didn't remember that. All right, and then we're going to glue the base on. Once again, I'm using hot glue for everything. There you go. I believe it's time for paint. So here's our tree on the paint table. We have a black base coat we're going to put on. And for that, we're using an automotive spray gun hooked up to an air compressor because it's super fast. So we do the black base. And while the paint's wet on the base of the tree, we use some ground cinnamon, and that begins to make a earthen look to the base. I use the cheapest cinnamon I can find. This Walmart stuff is like $1, I think. I have some other powdered spices I'm going to try soon, but that works well. So if you look at trees outside, they're not really brown. They're mostly gray with some brown and some green. So we're going to start out by doing a gray coat of paint all over this tree. It doesn't have to look 100% painted because trees aren't all the same color. Going to go over it after that with a brown to kind of bring out some highlights, and that colors will start to kind of blend in there. All right, so it's starting to take shape. We're going to use this Colortex moss now, along with cilantro and oregano in a minute. And then we also are going to be using a static grass applicator with some Mod Podge for the adhesion and a couple different mixtures of static grass. So the moss spray I get from Amazon. I spoke about it in the temple video. You don't have to use a lot here, but it really does give a good effect. And you can see it gets everywhere. I mean, I've got a space to do this. I would have done it outside, but it was super cold that day. And the majority of this is getting wiped off, but it gives a good texture to these trees. So here we go, wiping it off. It's going to leave a lot in the grooves and cracks, so when you look at it up close, you can really see what's going on. And it works good on the base piece also if you want to do that for a ground cover. So now we're going back over it. with gray again. We're going to kind of dull out that green so it's not quite as prominent. And then some more brown around that. So we're just layering the colors, stacking them up. Put some brown on the base there. So what we did here, this is the oregano and the other leaf spice there. So now we're going to use the static grass application. Basically what you do is you use your Mod Podge, you put it down where you're going to want the static grass. And the way that works, it basically puts a charge onto the piece of work in static forms when this stuff falls out of this shaker. That's the 2 millimeter, and we're also using a 6 millimeter mix. This is not a great machine I have, but I've developed a trick to get around it. You shake it on there while holding, and you can see it doesn't work great. But if you hang it upside down and let it dry, it works quite well. So I've gone back over this with a little bit of white airbrush to kind of do some highlights. And now I'm going to use a white dry brush. So basically you put paint on your brush and knock almost all of it off. And going up and down the tree kind of is going to pull out a lot of detail, highlights and things, and really make it look like a tree you'd see in the wild. All right, so here we go on the turntable. The last little thing I did was add that grass in the back, which is a clump of, it's pre-made grass. I don't remember. I think I got it at AC Moore maybe. And I just glued it down with the Mod Podge and let it dry, and then held it upside down so it would stand up. I'm pretty happy with the way this came out. The base there with all the grass and everything I think came out really nice. The tree overall has a very natural look to it. I think it really does a good job of representing what it's supposed to. I also put cinnamon around the edges of the base. I don't think I didn't do that on camera. So yeah, overall it came out really nice. I'm happy with the way I've developed trees. I really struggled with these. So here they are posed up with some figures on a base. So you got some CJesim ninjas hanging out with good old Daredevil, Han Solo, and Red Orc from Mythic Legions to kind of give you a sense of scale. I believe most people would probably want several of these if they're using them for toy photography or whatnot. In the back there's another tree that we did kind of as a test. It's actually the only one I have left here, so just saying. That started out as a 4-inch block of foam. I took two 2-inch pieces and put them together. So we can do giant trees, however big you want. You could stack up 20 pieces of foam together if you wanted to do it that way. There you go. And I hope you enjoyed this tree tutorial. We're going to try to do more of these builds here on the Crashbox channel. Thanks for checking us out. Give us a like and a subscribe. Thanks.